All right, guys, so we're going to start covering the last type of collision that we really need. And this type of collision, this is the shurikens, which really could simulate any type of collectible. The fact that we're hitting the enemies with it and the enemies are reacting would be the same way we could have a collectible on our game world, and then we could deal with that collision how we wanted to. So, however we really want to put it is useful. We need to think, though, of our organization. So let me kind of show that. If I go to the sketch file, here in Draw, we are going from a list of platforms and updating and displaying each one. We're displaying our player after we update. We're going through all of our enemies and we're updating them. I have the shurikens on here. We don't see that in the main draw. But technically, everything that we have created all inherits from dynamic. So I could, if I wanted to clean this up, is that I could take every single entity that I have created so far, put it in a list, and then use a for of loop and go through that entire list and just update everything because I have polymorphism working. Regardless of what I created, everything either directly has an update and a display, or it's using the dynamic creature update and display, or the dynamic update and display. So I could still do that. The problem that we have, though, is if I have shurikens here in this main display, we would have to change up our design on how we're dealing with the shurikens. I don't want to be able to lose the control on the player. The player I want, regardless of whatever state he's in, so I'm in a jump state, I should be able to fire a shuriken. If I'm in a dive state, I could still fire a shuriken. So that means that I need to be able to have that control ideally in my player. That would keep it the most organized. So it seems like it should be here, but it's not, because really I need it so that my player can control it. Now, could I do a full read changes? Absolutely. For proof of concept, I don't think that we need to. But if you guys were designing your own game and weapons were a very key component, the architecture that we have built so far, we might have to kind of change as we're developing it to make it so that it will handle it better. So with that in mind, ultimately we're going to end up having our own class for the shurikens to be able to do what we want, because we're going to end up having to kind of pull some things. These shurikens don't really have their own sensors because it's something that's a little bit more lightweight. So the collision code that we have for our sensors, that, you know, we have more robust system going on for our enemies and for our player, we have the collision code directly on the sensors. For the shuriken, we're going to have them a little bit more lightweight, and we're going to reuse a library code and apply that directly to the shurikens. We also need to implement our own type of gravity. So we're going to have to move that add force code that we've used before and put that on our shurikens directly. And since we're creating in the player, then we need to think about how we're going to do that. So the way that I have this is that ultimately we are having a list of shurikens that we are creating, and then we are sending those to the player. At least with those images. And then with those images, we can, from the player standpoint, so let's go back to the player. From the player standpoint, when we're doing the update and checking for all the collisions for the enemies and all of that stuff, that's also where we could determine for the shuriken stuff. So we're deeply coupling the shuriken weapons with our player. It's not something that you want to do all the time. You want to try to keep everything as decoupled as possible, but the player is the only one who is launching these, so it's okay in this sense. So what we're going to do is the same as we have an enemy list that we're kind of passing, so we're going to be able to use that. We need a list of shurikens, so we're going to be able to shoot multiple of them. Now you might end up wanting to limit how fast you can throw them, only have maybe a certain amount, and then you have to hit a collectible to get more, as some type of ammo. But for us to do this, we have to have a couple values that we're going to build in into our player that we can pass to our shurikens to control the pacing and stuff of that. So we have, our images that we're going to use to build a shuriken as we go, and a throw rate. This is different than us creating one shuriken, because we could the main sketch, we could create like one shuriken and then reuse it, but then you're going to be controlling your pacing, so you would have to have it off the screen or already hit an enemy before you can fire. So technically, for the way that I've done it, I can control the pacing, so I could have a faster fire rate if we had some type of collectible that allows him to do, like, say, double firing, or he can fire quicker or something to that effect. So I'm thinking of that as I develop that to do this. Okay, so let's start off building this out. You will need to go to the assets and pull the shuriken images. There's 5 images that you can find in the player stuff. So let's go there so that we can see where it is. Where's the assets? Okay, so we go to the assets. We are looking for the character sprite stuff. Okay, so we're doing Ninja 1. We've done all of these. The shurikens are right here. So there's those 5 images. So we're going to want to download those. I already have them downloaded. I have them in this folder. You're going to want to do that same thing. And then we're going to start building out. Okay, so I have created I'll show this real quick. I've created for mine all of my shuriken stuff. I have that organized in just one folder, so I just called it Ninja Weapon. I have my JavaScript file, and then I have those images. It's fairly lightweight. That's how I was going to build it. So that's what I'm going to do for this walkthrough. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new folder. I'll call it Ninja Weapon. And then in here, we need to load those files. So I'm going to load these files. Okay. And then for our sketch, we need to start building this out. I'm not going to create the class for it just yet because we don't need to. We have to plan for us passing the information from our main sketch to our player, and then our player, as he presses an attack, we can check for the pacing of our fire rate, and then if we're good to fire, then we would create a whole new shuriken and we'd pass in that information. Okay, so we really only need, in this case, one variable here, and this is just going to be a list of images. So I'm just going to call it shuriken images. And then in our preload, using the same kind of fashion, we're going to load these shuriken images. So we need to have this function created. So let's go ahead and create that. And I'm going to put this right next to my platform stuff. Okay, so function load shuriken images. Okay, shuriken, we need to create the list. So shuriken images is a list. And then we want to go through and we want to do a for loop, look for all of those. So they're all named in a predictable manner, 0 to 4, which is something that we've done before. So we need a for loop. Index is equal to 0. Index is going up to, but not including 5, because we stop at 4. And index is going up by 1. So then we'll just build this out using a string literal. Shuriken images dot push load image ninja weapon, and then it's weapon underscore 00, and then this is our changing variable, so we'll call that index dot png. Okay, make sure you're using the right character. Okay, this is not a single quote. All right, so this should give us it. Again, remember, we're going to have to wait 3 minutes for this to fully load, because this is going to error out when we first do this. That is different. Images. Okay. Now, after we have this, we are going to want to pass this to our player so that he has a hold of it. So the same as like we passed the platforms to our player, we passed all the enemies to our player, we need to pass the shuriken images to our player so that our player can do something with it. So in our setup, we're going to do the same thing here. Now, if I ran this without finishing it, it's going to error out because we haven't created that method yet. Images. And then we'll pass in the shuriken images. Okay, so we have not created this method right here. We need to go ahead and create that. So we're going to go to the player and we're going to find that method that we're going to build in. Just making sure I'm checking my notes so everything's good. Okay. I'll do this where I load my enemies in my player, in my player file. Okay, load enemies list, load platform list, load shuriken images, and then we need those images that we're passing in. And then this needs to get stored as a list of images on the player so that I can use that to create. So shuriken images equals these images that I'm passing in. Okay, so now I need to have a hold for that in my player. So we're coming up to our player. Let's do it here, above our sensors. Doesn't matter, but I like it in terms of organization. Okay, so this dot shuriken images, we'll start that out as null when we first create our player, and then we loaded that with that method. Okay, we also need to know when we create those shurikens. We're using those images, but we need to have a list of those shurikens that we will eventually create that we will use to hold whenever we launch a Ninja Star. And then we can set our throw rate. So I'm using this as a timer, like I want to be able to say, for example, I'm going by milliseconds. So if I wanted to be able to fire 1 per second, I'm going to be dividing by this throw rate. Okay. If I wanted to fire, say, 3 per second, then I need to have that throw rate would be like this. Okay. So that's what I'm going to kind of use to help control my pacing. so that I can change that throw rate and be able to fire more and do all kinds of fun stuff with that. Okay, so we have that. Now we need to think of where we're going to be putting this in for our player. And in the update, I think that's the best spot. So right here, we are, colliding with our enemies from the ones that are in that dynamics to check. So anything that passes in our radar sensor, we're going to deal with it. Right after that, though, we end up doing a kickback for when an enemy hits us. We do a little bit of a kickback, and then we respond. So that's this. After that, that would be a good place for us to do the ninja stars. You could also maybe, if you wanted to do it, I guess technically before it, you could have a little bit of a kickback, like a recoil of him throwing them. But when he's jumping up and stuff, you may not really notice that much. So that's more of a flavor thing that you guys can do in your guys' game. Okay, but we do want to put this to some type of key command, key code. I had mine set up with the right arrow key, so I got space, I got up, I got down, I got right arrow key to be able to play with stuff. So I'm using key code 39. You guys could do something different based off of how you guys did your structure. So really, I want to do if key is down, so that's that right arrow key, then I'm going to be checking some stuff. So now I want an actual timer. And the timer is going to be based off of milliseconds. We can use the millis code, okay, and that will pull whatever the current milliseconds are, and then I can use that I can store those values, and then I can, simply calculate the difference to find how much time has progressed. So I'm going to start something as this, elapsed time. This is what I want. I'm going to start it at 1,000. And I want this as like a countdown. So I'm starting it at 1 second has passed so that, I can immediately fire and I don't have to wait for like a draw up. But then I'm going to be calculating as we're doing it. Okay. So if the shurikens that we have in our list, which we don't have any yet, if that's greater than 0, then I'm going to need to check when the last one was fired. And this is so that I can control the pacing. Okay. If it wasn't, then I should be able to fire right away. Okay. So we'll just call it last star. So that means we have a list. We have at least one in there. We need to pull the last one. So this dot shurikens, and then we'll go from this dot shurikens dot length -1. So that would be our last one. That's where we're going to assign, and then we can look at for what I'm thinking is when we create a star, we want to know what that throw time is. So instantly when we create a shuriken, we will mark the time of when we created it, and then that will let us know, like, hey, when that was last thrown if we are doing it with elapsed time. So if we have one, then our elapsed time will be different. It's going to be whatever the current time is minus that last star, whatever that thrown time is. Okay, and this will give us a reference. So we should be able to fire if we have nothing. This will be our default value. We are at 1,000 seconds. We should be able to fire. If not, if we've just fired one and we have not had, say, like 1,000 milliseconds passing, so like 1 second, or checking our fire rate, this will, start accruing up, because this will only be created once. So as we do this, this number will start getting larger, and then we can check with it. Okay. So that's what we want to do. So after we do this if statement, we're going to do another if statement, and we're going to say, hey, if the elapsed time is greater than or equal to 1,000. You shouldn't do it exactly on 1,000 because it's never going to be exact, depending on how fast the frame rates are and if there's a little hiccup or anything on your screen. we want to do it, greater than. So if at least 1,000 milliseconds have passed, we'll say if the elapsed time is greater than or equal to 1,000 minus this dot throw rate. Now in this case, my throw rate is 1. So if the elapsed time is greater than 1,000, then I should be able to fire a certain rate. Now if I made that 3, I should be able to fire 3 a second because we're looking around 333 milliseconds for my elapsed time. So as soon as that does that. Okay. So once I do that, what I'm wanting, and we'll kind of look at where we're firing the shuriken, probably don't want it, firing like from the middle of his body. Maybe we might want it higher up, and then we're going to choose, having it fire maybe with a little bit of a parabolic flight. We need to know like where that starting position is, so I'm going to call that fire position. Okay, and what I'm doing with this fire position is I'm going to take the position of my player, but then I want to offset it some. So I'm just going to do it directly here. Take the fire position of my player, and then I can offset it directly. So if he's moving in any state, I should still be able to do this. There's a couple ways that we could write this, but we're just playing around with this. So I'm going to do p5.vector.add, and we're going to add our player's position. But since we need it to be dynamic, we got to take a copy, so it's not going to affect our player when we're playing, when we're affecting this. The other piece is basically our offset. Okay, so I'll start it at 0, 0, but we probably will want to offset the Y up higher, so it looks kind of like it's coming from his shoulder. Okay, and then we're going to want to create a shuriken using that. So this position, why did I do that? Okay. All right, so then we'll take, when we create this, we're going to push a shuriken on here. So we're going to need to create a class, and we'll call it shuriken. And I think really we're going to be inheriting from dynamic, but really all we need is we need that fire position that we just created, and we need those images. This dot shuriken images. Okay, and then everything else, I mean, we don't need to pass in that it's going to be a certain type or anything. Now, if that is the case, you're probably going to want to deal with that. But really all we need is those images to build the animations, and then we can pass in that stuff. Okay, so let's go to the shuriken. We're going to start creating that now, because now it makes sense for us to do it. Okay, so we'll come to our sketch files. Oops, we're going to create a file, and I'm going to just call it shuriken.js. Okay. Now my shuriken is still going to be inheriting extends from the dynamic class. There's a lot of stuff that we still are going to use, but we're going to modify this quite a bit. So constructor, we need that position, and we need those images. Okay. Everything else, now this is from the dynamic class, requires some more stuff. So we're going to have to say some things. The type is a shuriken. Position is going to be what we just passed in. We are giving a vector. So I'm just hard coding it in here, but there could be cases that you wanted to say you collected some special shurikens and it has different flight path. You could build this different. So the values that I'm going to do, because I want it to not just go forward, I want gravity to affect it so that it's going down. But I don't want it to go kind of straight like this. I want it to kind of go up. and make a parabolic flight. So I'm going to say that I want it to go like 7 forward, and then I want it to go up. Okay. And then we got dynamic verse map. We don't really care about it reacting with the map. It is dynamic verse dynamic, and it is not friendly. Where's my error? That one. Okay. And then let's see. Other stuff that we would need. Our shuriken is going to have a radius and a size. So I'm just going to kind of build this out. Radius. Let's say it's equal to 25. And we can play around with these values. I'll have it calculate the size. This dot radius times 2. Because we're using images, I'll put a width and a height in there just to make it easier. This dot height, but this is not really necessary. We want to add an animation. We're going to add it directly in here. So this dot current animation is equal to a new animation. We'll call it throw. And we're not really ever switching from it. We're passing in the list of images that we have. The subject would be this. And then for our X position, our Y position, our X offset, our Y offset, or width and height offset, and then our rate. I'm not offsetting the animation. I'm having it locked onto the actual star itself, because the star itself is going to become the sensor. So that's why I was changing the position of like how we were firing it and everything. I'm just going to keep it locked in. We do want to have some type of gravity that we're going to use. So this dot gravity. And I don't need it to be really fast, so I'll probably start with like 1, and if I don't like it, I can make some changes. We need to know that throw time, so this dot thrown time. And when we create, I need to make sure that I put that correctly. Yeah, last start at thrown time. Okay. Ooh, I didn't put in that list. That's stupid. I need to move that. That's gonna bug me. Wait 1. There we go. Okay. All right. So we have our thrown time. This is going to be called as soon as we create a new shuriken. We have that fire time. And since we are firing and it's kind of like a particle, it needs to be destroyed at a certain point. If it goes off screen, that's basically when we're going to say that it's destroyed and we need to remove it from the list. If we hit an enemy, we can also destroy it and we can remove it from the list, or however we want to deal with the rate. So I'm going to have some type of flag that I'm going to say is called destroy. I'll call it false. Okay, so that's pretty good for our constructor. Again, you might make some changes on your guys' game depending on how you need those weapons. Okay, we are going to need an update that is going to end up having to call that gravity. So let's add our add force. So we can just go into a previous one that has it. So I'm going to copy this from my dynamic creature, come back down. We'll add that there. We need our collided code. So, but this one's going to be a little bit different. We have circle sensors for everything. All of our enemies have them. And we are checking those against, we're drawing based off of a circle. Okay, so we want to be able to pass this in. Object.size. Yeah, okay. So let's do that one too. Collided. And really all we need to do with this, because we're doing a library, is we're doing a circle-circle collision, but we have vectors. So it's circle, circle, vector. That's going to be our collision. It needs the position and the size of each one of those things, which that's kind of how we built it. So the shuriken itself would be this dot position that we're passing in, this dot size, and then we're passing in that object. So that would be the enemy's position or their sensor, and the object dot size. So we can have it hit directly the head or the body. This would be useful if when the player is doing the attack, we could actually maybe have some hit points or attack strength on the shurikens themselves, and we could also give less damage if we say we're hitting a body shot instead of a headshot. So we're just checking for the collision here. That would be it. Those are the two main functions that we need, and now all we have to do is really put an update in a display. So I'll do those right above. So update would need for us to use that add force for the gravity. This dot add force, this dot gravity. Why did I do it that way? We should also be adding the this dot add force. I'm changing how I wrote it. I'm calling it audible. This dot add force, and then this would be this dot velocity. No. That will change the velocity based off of the gravity that we have. We already have velocity. Like this. The way that I had it written was I had the position of the shuriken adding the velocity directly, which we may end up changing that because it might do the gravity too much. Okay. Then we need to check the position of the shuriken. So if the position of the shuriken is greater than the, that means we would be off the screen, or the Y position is greater than the height, which would mean we're, we fell off the screen on that end, then we should mark it as able to be destroyed. This, actually having this destroy flag and a lot of stuff, you can't be inside of the object itself and directly destroy it, so you have to flag it to be destroyed, and then once you're out of any methods of that object, then you can choose to destroy it based off of that flag. So that's really all that we would need for the update. We have to have one for the display, and it's just going to be this dot current animation dot update, this dot current animation dot display. That's it. We have no sensors or anything to do with this. That should be good. Okay, so now we can go back to our player. Let's rerun. Gonna have some errors. Just try to fire one. Shuriken is not defined because I didn't pull up that one. Shuriken.js. Need to create that in my index. That's dumb. We have to have the player created before we can do that. So this could go, as long as it's after dynamic, it could go pretty much right here. It does not need an FSM. Actually, this really doesn't matter because it's not getting called until the player is created. Yeah, we could do it right here. All right, so we are pulling from the Ninja weapon. So Ninja weapon folder, and then it's shuriken.js. Let's check if we're actually calling it. Console.log. So the timer is working. I can't spam it. It's slowing me down. But I am not seeing anything because we have not done anything to update the Shuriken. So we're creating it, but we're not seeing anything. Okay. So after this, that would be after we have hit the space bar, that would determine for us to create the Shuriken. After this, we can go through and update all of the Shurikens and check those. So we could say if this dot shurikens dot length, if that's greater than 0, and I'm going to do this as a reverse for loop so that we can also remove it if we need to. So inside here we can say for let index equals this dot shurikens dot length -1. This will allow us to see it. Index -. Okay. Yeah. We'll just give a temporary name for it. Shuriken is equal to the list. This dot shurikens at index. And then we can just update that. So shuriken.update, shuriken.display. Let's see its performance. Whoa. So it's firing crazy. And that's all because of this. Let me comment it out and just see what my flight is, doing it the way that I originally had it. This dot position dot add this dot velocity. And It's because my velocity is initially changing as we do it. So yeah, if we did it that way, it's fine, but we would have to increase what we're considering as our velocity. So let's play with some numbers so we can see it move. Wow, that's still so high. So that's moving really, really fast. Because we're using that velocity as what we're doing for calculating the gravity with the add force. Position to add this velocity. Velocity is going to be changing dynamically. I'm just playing with the numbers at this point. I was firing way too fast. I don't like that. Because we don't need to keep adding the velocity. So the part of the problem is that we're continually adding the velocity doing it this way. Here we added the velocity one time and it's not a composite. So that's why it has a different flight pattern. Okay. So what I want is I don't really want it to fly that far across the screen, but let's look at where it's getting fired from. I think it's getting fired too low for the player. I want it to actually go up, so I'm going to go back to the player where we've created it, and let's shift it up some. So this fire position, we're going to just shift up. This becomes our offset. So let's try 20. And maybe I might just move that forward just a little bit. It's a weird error. I think that was the one that switched out. Okay, I'm going to ignore that one for right now. All right, so there's our shuriken. Let's get into the collisions now. So we have our shurikens. We're creating them. They're actively destroying themselves as we need when they go off the screen. We could test that by looking at this .shurikens .length. Might only be able to get 2 on there. Oop, there's an error. Okay, we are not actively destroying. Oh, no. We marked him for being destroyed. We haven't actually destroyed him yet. So, if we're in this list and we've updated them, we need to remove them if they are able to be removed. So if shuriken dot destroy, if that's true, then this dot shurikens dot splice index, and we're removing 1. I don't have hold of it outside of this. So I need to move that inside. Okay. All right, and still not deleting it. It's problematic. Let me look at my notes. That should work. If shuriken dot destroy is true, should be good in here. Looks like I got a logic error. Okay, let's look at the shuriken. I didn't see this error earlier. This dot position dot x is greater than width. Position here. Ugh. That's it. That's what I did. This dot destroy is true. There you go. Let's see. Okay, we can get up to 2, but that's about it. All right, so now we have it. Yeah. I don't need to see that. I don't need to see that. All right, so we create a shuriken. We now remove a shuriken. While we're in here, so in between here, because if we hit an enemy, that's when we're also going to want to destroy. We're going to end up having the same type of code that we've had for the collisions, but this is going to be going from all of the enemies. We don't care which enemy, if they're dynamic or not. So they could be off the screen and we could still technically kill them. So first, for let index equals this dot enemies list dot length. And we can have this one as a, doesn't really matter if this one's reversed or not, because we're not splicing from this one. Index is equal to 0. We'll just start with the last one though. Index minus minus. Okay, so enemy will be from that list. Enemies list at index. If the enemy is dynamic, and I think we could just copy this from the other one. We come here. We're just changing this. So Dynamic, dynamic, not friendly. We're checking the sensors. So we're going to just modify this. Okay, so I'm pulling all of that, and we're basically building it off the enemy though. So here we're pulling off the list. We know what our enemy is. If our enemy, he is collidable, that means he's not dead, and he is not friendly, then we can go off of all the sensors that the enemy has. Enemy. And if the sensor is head or body and the shuriken has collided with it. So shuriken collided with the sensor. That's it. All right. So if the sensor that we have of the enemy, if it's a head or a body, and the shuriken has collided with it, then we're going to deal with it. So that enemy, if the enemy's type is enemy 1, then we are pushing a new die state for them. If it's enemy 2, then we're pushing the enemy 2 die state. If it's enemy 3, then we're pushing the enemy 3 die state. Okay, we could also take health, it doesn't matter. But we do got to do something else. So if we have collided, so that means we collided with one of them. So this is true somewhere in here. Then what we need to do is that the shuriken needs to be destroyed also here. If you wanted it to be fully off the screen, then you would not use that. Syntax token. Awesome. $143. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It's a bracket thing. This is, as long as we have more than one enemy. Missing some brackets. Okay, I'm going to just double check where I'm at. All right, so we're destroying that, but that is, all of that needs to be part of, no. This is in the wrong place. We have to have this outside of the sensors for the enemy, outside of this if statement right here, outside of this enemy list. We're running that whole thing, and then so we started with our shurikens, we're updating, we're displaying, and then we can say if they've been removed. So the reason why we have them here and we can play around with this. We could have this update after we have this. There's a couple ways that we could do this, but if we are marking this as destroyed, we could also make it so that it's not collidable off the screen if we wanted to do that too. Okay, that should work. Now we're going to check. Oh, line 100. Well, that was my fault. Enemy, push date, and it's enemy, enemy. Okay, now let's try to kill him. Yay! Okay. So like I was saying, there's multiple ways that we could do this. Now we kind of have a game working. We're able to play the things that we have, like the platforms appearing on the screen. We could change those things. We got to still do a parallax background and do some sound effects. But for the most part, this is basically done. We have done with all the collisions. We have the player reacting to the enemy reacting to the player. We have the player being able to jump onto platforms. The enemies, we can choose where we want them to start. So if we want to make changes with that, we can do that. We can have the shurikens fire. The enemies are reacting to those, but we could also build for the player to react to those. That error needs to go. That is in a dive state. So player's position disappears. I'm going to fix this error, but we don't need to see that in the video. Okay. That's it, though, for this. Let me fix that error, and I'll just show you guys what it is in case you guys have that error also. But that is all the collisions. The next video that we're going to have is going to be going over the parallax background. All right, good luck. Have fun. Okay. For those of you who still maybe have that error and you are wondering where it is, I have in my update for my dive state that when I am colliding with a platform, that I'm changing my platform position to what I collided with, and then I'm returning some state. That's what I'm doing here. I'm resetting this position when I exit. Okay, but if I'm in the handle input and I am doing coyote jump, so I'm pressing the space bar and I'm trying to jump, that's when it's an airing out because it's calling this my coyote jumping, and it's airing out because I don't have it. So what I can do, and that was because I rewrote it. I originally had this inside of my update. So I can just check if this dot platform position, so if that exists, then I'm doing this. Otherwise, I'm ignoring it. I should probably fix it. Coyote jumping. Yep. So it's going into that jump state. Yep. Okay. So that was it. We just need to make sure that we're not trying to call it with platform position when there is no platform position. And that happened when we were handling the input for our coyote jump. All right. That's it. That sums up all of our collision stuff. You guys can use this, adapt this, do all kinds of stuff with this. Just be careful and not coupling things too tight if they don't need to be, to make it so that you can add features as you go. The stuff that I did with the shurikens, I might have to recode or change if I wanted to add some different things or different type of weapons. I would have to build it a little bit different. Okay, so it does take a little bit of planning. Other than that, that's it. This finishes up 3-4. Good luck. Have fun.